The wind howled through the empty highway, carrying the scent of damp earth and decay. The night stretched endlessly over the lonely road, where Daniel's car sat lifeless, steam rising from the hood. His fingers drummed against the steering wheel, frustration mounting. "Damn it," he muttered, reaching for his phone. No signal. Of course. He sighed, stepping out of the car. The cool night air wrapped around him like an unwelcome embrace. The road was deserted, a thin strip of asphalt cutting through dense forest on both sides. There was no sign of civilization, no headlights in the distance, just darkness pressing in like a predator waiting to pounce. Daniel popped the hood, the feeble glow of his flashlight illuminating the engine. He wasn't a mechanic, but he hoped something obvious would jump out at him. Instead, the only thing that jumped was his own heartbeat when he heard it. A whisper. Faint, almost imperceptible. "You shouldn't be here." His breath hitched. The words were carried by the wind, yet distinct, as if spoken right next to him. He swung the flashlight toward the trees, but there was nothing. Just the skeletal branches swaying in the moonlight. He swallowed hard. "Hello?" he called, his voice hesitant. Silence. Daniel shook his head. He was exhausted, that was all. Long drive, little sleep. The mind played tricks. He turned back to the engine, determined to ignore his own paranoia. But then, footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crunching against dead leaves. His skin prickled. The flashlight trembled in his grasp as he scanned the tree line. And then he saw it. A figure. Tall, ragged clothing hanging from its gaunt frame, standing just at the forest's edge. Its face was lost in shadow, its posture unnervingly still. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. "Hey, you need help?" His own voice sounded foreign, thin against the vast silence. The figure didn't move, didn't breathe, just stood there. Then, in a slow, rattling whisper, the words came again. "You shouldn't be here." Daniel staggered back, heart hammering against his ribs. The voice. It wasn't coming from the figure. Its lips hadn't moved. The flashlight flickered, and in that brief moment of darkness, the figure shifted. It was closer now. Daniel stumbled toward his car, fumbling with the door handle. He threw himself inside, locking the doors, his breath ragged. The flashlight's beam wavered as he aimed it outside. The road was empty. No figure, no whisper, just the wind howling through the trees. His fingers clutched the steering wheel in a death grip. "Calm down," he whispered to himself. "You're tired. You imagined it." The engine coughed, sputtered, then roared to life. Relief flooded his chest. He slammed the car into drive and pressed the gas. The tires screeched against the pavement as he sped forward, desperate to put distance between him and whatever had been standing in those trees. The road stretched endlessly ahead, his headlights cutting through the darkness. He kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something lurking behind him. But there was nothing. Minutes passed. His breathing slowed. His pulse steadied. He allowed himself to believe it was over. Until he noticed the smell. Faint at first, then stronger. A stench of rot, of damp earth and something metallic, like blood left too long in the sun. Daniel's stomach churned. He pressed a hand to his nose, trying to block it out. And that's when he heard the whisper. "You shouldn't be here." His breath turned to ice. The voice, it wasn't outside. It was in the car. Slowly, his trembling hand reached for the rearview mirror. He didn't want to look. Every instinct screamed at him not to. But he did. And in the dim reflection, sitting in the back seat, was the whispering man. Daniel's scream tore through the night as the car veered off the road. He awoke to the sound of dripping water. Pain lanced through his body. His head throbbed. A metallic taste filled his mouth. Blood. He groaned, forcing his eyes open. The car had crashed into the woods, the windshield shattered. The world outside a blur of trees and shadows. His breath came in ragged gasps as he unbuckled his seatbelt, his limbs heavy with shock. Then he remembered. The voice, the figure, the thing in his back seat. Dread clawed at his throat. Slowly, he turned his head. The back seat was empty, but something was wrong. The car smelled of rot, stronger now, almost suffocating. And the whispers, they were everywhere, soft, insidious, slithering through the air like unseen fingers tracing his skin. You shouldn't be here. He fumbled for the door handle, hands slick with sweat. It wouldn't budge. His breath came in frantic gasps as he shoved against it, his pulse roaring in his ears. Then a shadow moved in the shattered windshield. Daniel froze. The whispering man stood outside, mere inches from the glass, his face still obscured by darkness. But now Daniel could see his hands, long, bony fingers pressing against the windshield, the nails blackened, the flesh stretched thin over sharp knuckles. Then, impossibly, the figure began to melt through the glass. Daniel screamed, kicking at the door, clawing at the handle. The figure's head tilted, as if amused. The whispers grew louder, filling the car, filling his skull, filling him. You shouldn't be here. Darkness swallowed him whole. Daniel awoke to the sound of knocking. His eyes flew open. He was back in his car, parked on the side of the road. The engine was running. The windshield was intact. His body was drenched in sweat. A police officer stood outside, tapping the window. Sir, you okay? You've been sitting here a while. Daniel blinked, his mind spinning. Had it been a dream? A hallucination? With shaking hands, he rolled down the window. I think I had an accident. The officer frowned. No accident, sir. You've been sitting here for hours. Are you feeling all right? Daniel's mouth opened, but no words came. His hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. Something wasn't right. Then, in the rearview mirror, something shifted. Daniel's breath hitched. The back seat was empty, but the reflection in the mirror wasn't his own. The whispering man smiled and whispered, You shouldn't be here. They found Daniel's car the next morning, abandoned on the highway. The engine was running. The driver's seat was empty. No sign of Daniel was ever found. But on quiet nights, if you drive down that lonely stretch of road, roll down your window and listen, you might hear a whisper. You shouldn't be here.